Imagine this: June 4th, 1944, the Atlantic Ocean, 150 miles west of Cape Blanco, Africa. 58 German submariners emerge from the cold Atlantic waters, arms up in surrender, their U-boat disabled and flooding beneath them. They are adrift in hostile waters, encircled by American warships, anticipating being machine-gunned or taken aboard for harsh interrogation, then execution. They had just become the first enemy naval crew captured at sea by the U.S. Navy since 1812. But Captain Daniel Gallery's next move would stun these hardened German veterans, alter naval history permanently, and write one of World War II's most incredible stories of decency amid total war. This is not the tale you believe you know. Before we explore this classified account, please subscribe and like this video. And by this story's end, you'll grasp why one German officer declared this event restored his belief in humanity, even during history's most savage conflict. To grasp why this event was so astounding, you must know what U-boats signified in 1944. The German U-505 had menaced Allied shipping for 2 years. Every vessel she sank held not just war materials, but letters from GIs to their wives, photos of children, supplies for field hospitals, and nourishment for hungry populations in freed regions. When a U-boat hit, it wasn't merely military tactics. It was personal loss amplified across many families. By 1944, submarine combat had grown savage beyond belief. German U-boats had instructions to sink anything under an Allied flag, often without warning. Allied forces, conversely, had implemented a policy of sinking U-boats on sight, seldom attempting to save survivors. Both factions had discarded the chivalrous codes of naval combat. It was in this atmosphere of shared brutality that our account starts. The individual who would alter it all was Captain Daniel Gallery, a Chicago-born Irish-American who planned 3 steps ahead and was unafraid to bend rules. Gallery was raised in a working-class area where your promise was your bond, and treating others well was more important than rigid rule-following. By 1943, Gallery led Task Group 22-3, hunting U-boats in the Atlantic with his carrier, USS Guadalcanal, and 5 destroyer escorts. But Gallery was fixed on an impossible notion. He didn't just want to destroy U-boats, he wanted to seize one intact. Not since 1812 had the U.S. Navy seized an enemy vessel on the high seas. His commanders believed he was crazy. U-boats were made to sink fast when hit, and German crews had firm orders to scuttle their vessels rather than allow their capture. Gallery began training his men regardless. What Gallery could not foresee was that in under 8 months, he'd be looking at 58 terrified German sailors in the sea, and the choice he made then would be discussed for the next 80 years. But what Gallery was unaware of was that 3,000 miles away, a German submarine was about to make a deadly error that would bring his impossible ambition to the ultimate test. And the young German skipper making that error, he was about to learn something about American decency that would change his life permanently. Meanwhile, U-505 was experiencing the worst patrol of her career. Her prior commander had endured a total mental collapse during a depth charge assault in October 1943. Before his whole crew, Kapitan Lieutenant Peter Scheck had taken his pistol and shot himself in the head instead of facing capture. The horrific event had destroyed crew morale and left them with a superstitious fear that their vessel was cursed. New Commander Harold Lang, at 40 one of the eldest U-boat skippers but new to U-505, was under immense strain. By June 4th, 1944, they had been at sea 2 months without sinking one Allied ship. The crew was depleted, provisions were dwindling, and spirits were at an all-time low. What Langer didn't realize was that Gallery's task group was tracking them. On that Sunday morning, Lieutenant William T. Tolan was flying a routine patrol in his Grumman TBF Avenger when a sight grabbed his attention. At 11:09 a.m., he saw a dark form moving under the surface, the unmistakable outline of a large submarine. What transpired next occurred in only 6 minutes. But concealed in those 6 minutes was one 7-second choice by a frightened German sailor that would save all their lives, though no one would know it until much later. Toland's depth charge assault took U-505 completely by surprise. The blast damaged the sub's diving controls and electricals, compelling Lang to make a critical choice: surface now or risk losing the submarine completely. At 11:15 a.m., U-505 erupted from the surface like a hurt whale, water pouring from her hull, her diesel engines sputtering to life as her crew frantically tried to pull fresh air into the boat. Gallery, tracking radio chatter from the Guadalcanal's bridge, recognized this was his chance. Gallery had moments to choose. He could follow standard doctrine and blast the submarine from the water, or try something not done in 132 years. Instead of commanding his ships to destroy the submarine with gunfire, he issued the order his men had been rehearsing for. "Away all boats! We're going to board her!" German sailors were streaming from U-505's conning tower and leaping into the Atlantic. Some were hurt, others panicked, but dense black smoke billowed from the submarine's hull, clear proof she was severely damaged and perhaps about to detonate. But here is what neither the Americans nor Germans understood. A single error by one panicked sailor was about to alter everything. Among the German crew deserting ship was Petty Officer Gottfried Fischer, told to arm the scuttling charges that would sink U-505 in minutes. But in his haste, Fischer made a vital mistake. He set the fuse for 7 minutes, not 30 seconds. This error would save them all, but the Americans boarding U-505 didn't know they were fighting a 7-minute timer. They believed they had perhaps 30 seconds before the submarine detonated under them. Lieutenant Albert David of the USS Pillsbury was getting ready to lead the boarding team onto an enemy sub. At 23, David knew he was signing up for a suicide run, boarding a damaged enemy submarine that could detonate any second, possibly facing fire from the remaining crew. With no knowledge of what booby traps lay below, David didn't pause. With radioman Stanley Widowick and signalman Arthur Knispel, he boarded a small craft and neared the smoking U-505. As they got on, they could hear the menacing ticking of scuttling charges somewhere inside. Water was pouring in through open valves, and electrical fires were igniting in the control room. David made the choice that would save U-505 and possibly the German crew still adrift in the sea. Instead of pulling back, he led his men below decks to locate and neutralize the charges. Working by flashlight in the smoke-filled sub, David found the main scuttling valve and secured it, halting the flood. Widowick discovered the timing device and, lacking any training in German explosives, cautiously unhooked the wires. One wrong connection could have sent them all to the bottom. Within an hour, U-505 was secure and being towed. But the true test was only starting. Because what Gallery was about to find inside that submarine would be worth more than sinking 100 U-boats, but only if he could figure out an impossible riddle. When David's boarding team went down into U-505's control room, they discovered an intelligence officer's fantasy. In their haste to desert the ship, the German crew had left nearly everything: codebooks, charts, technical guides, and crucially, an Enigma machine still configured with the day's encryption keys. The intelligence was absolute gold. Codes, charts, and secrets that would spare thousands of Allied lives. Technical guides detailed German advancements in torpedo technology and sub-construction. Charts displayed previously unknown patrol zones and refueling spots. But all this would be useless if the Germans found out U-505 was captured. If Berlin learned their codes were breached, they would instantly alter their entire communications network. Gallery was about to make a choice that would stun his own men almost as much as it stunned the Germans. A choice so bizarre that it would stay classified for decades, not for its ruthlessness, but for its mercy in wartime. This posed a unique problem. How do you conceal the capture of a 252-foot submarine and 58 prisoners of war? While his boarding crew secured U-505, Gallery confronted an equally tricky challenge: what to do with 58 German sailors who just saw their submarine seized intact. Standard orders were clear: question the prisoners, then send them to POW camps. But Gallery knew that following orders would nullify the incredible intelligence victory they had just secured. The German crew, bobbing in the Atlantic, prepared to die. Captain Lieutenant Lang later recorded that he was sure he and his men would be killed. Tales of submarine crews being slain rather than saved were rampant on both sides. But as American boats neared to pick up the German survivors, something remarkable occurred. Instead of rough treatment or quick interrogation, the German sailors were hauled aboard American ships and promptly given medical aid, dry uniforms, and hot meals. Gallery had made a choice that bucked decades of naval combat tradition. He would handle the German prisoners not as beaten foes, but as fellow seamen who had battled honorably and earned respect. This wasn't emotion. It was smart psychology. Well-treated captives were more apt to cooperate, less apt to try escaping, and more apt to uphold the total secrecy the intelligence mission demanded. When Lange was taken aboard the USS Guadalcanal, he braced for harsh questioning in tight confines. Instead, he was treated with what he later termed as unexpected American courtesy. Gallery met personally with the senior German officers, explaining the situation. Their submarine was captured legally. They were now prisoners, but would be handled with military respect. For intelligence reasons, they must be held apart from other German prisoners. What Gallery omitted was that their temporary separation would endure for the rest of the war. But the real challenge wasn't seizing the submarine. It was what followed. Gallery's answer was as bold as seizing U-505 itself. Collaborating with naval intelligence, he organized for the German crew to be covertly moved to a specially made facility at Camp Ruston, Louisiana, where they would be held in total isolation from the world. The German crew was moved in small parties, blindfolded and guarded, with cover stories devised. Official records stated these prisoners were taken in North Africa and needed special handling due to their knowledge of sensitive equipment. What the Germans discovered at Camp Ruston stunned them more than their handling on the American ships. Instead of bleak prison conditions, they were put in clean barracks, given regular food that was often better than what American GIs were getting overseas, and permitted recreational time. Gallery's instructions were clear. The U-505 crew was to be handled as professional military captives, not criminals. They would be paid for work, get mail access, and keep military discipline among themselves. This wasn't just humane. It was strategically vital. Well-treated prisoners were far less inclined to try escaping, which could expose the whole operation. Furthermore, intelligence officers learned that the Germans' gratitude made them surprisingly helpful with technical details. The irony was clear to all. German submarine crews, shown in Allied propaganda as vicious killers, were acting as professional seamen who replied to professional handling with professional conduct. While the U-505 crew adjusted to their odd new life in Louisiana, the intelligence from their submarine was already altering the war. The Enigma machine and codebooks gave Allied codebreakers unparalleled insights into German naval messages, helping to spare hundreds of Allied ships and thousands of lives. Technical data revealed German advancements that were quickly shared with Allied engineers. The detailed charts helped convoy organizers steer shipping clear of German submarine patrols. But Gallery's greatest contribution might have been showing that treating enemy captives with respect was not just morally correct, it was strategically shrewd. His method became a template for prisoner handling through the rest of the war. News of Gallery's success circulated quietly in intelligence networks. Other commanders started using similar tactics with captured men, with reliably good outcomes: better intelligence, fewer escape attempts, and fewer security issues. Gallery's choice had deep personal effects, too. American sailors in the capture later called it the most profound moment of their naval careers, not because they seized an enemy ship, but because they displayed humanity amid war. For the German crew, the event was equally life-changing. Men taught to view Americans as brutal foes found their captors were professional seamen much like them, capable of both military skill and personal decency. The secret of U-505's capture was kept through the war and for several years after. The German crew was finally freed and sent back to Germany in 1946, over 2 years after their capture. When the former prisoners got back to Germany, they found a nation wrecked and struggling to rebuild. Many of their fellow U-boat sailors had not returned. German submarine duty had one of the highest casualty rates of any service, with over 75% of crews lost in action. The crew's accounts of their treatment were first met with doubt from other German veterans. But as facts came out, the U-505 event became a strong illustration of how foes could treat one another with decency even in total war. Captain Gallery showed that even in mankind's darkest times, people could pick dignity over savagery. Harold Lang, the young skipper who braced for death that June morning, lived until 2003, often talking about the respect he got from his American captors. Lang frequently said that Gallery's choice had renewed his faith that decency could endure even in total war. Consider this for a second. These German sailors braced for death. Instead, they encountered something that made them doubt all they were told about their American foes. The U-505 crew was notably cooperative during their stay at Camp Ruston, a credit to how respectful handling can turn foes into allies. Years later, Harold Lang noted that the dignified handling made cooperation seem like the honorable path, not betrayal. And here is something amazing. When U-505 was relocated to the Chicago Museum in 1954, German U-boat veterans who had moved to America volunteered to help save their former enemy. These men, who once battled Allied ships, worked beside American veterans to guarantee this story of honor in combat would never be lost. The capture of U-505 reminds us that the greatest generation wasn't just great because they prevailed in World War II. They were great because of how they opted to fight it. When Captain Daniel Gallery had the chance to follow the savage precedent of submarine combat, he opted instead to follow his conscience and his code of honor. Gallery could have sunk U-505 and let her crew perish. He could have seized them and subjected them to brutal captivity. Military need and wartime rage would have excused either action. Instead, he picked a third way, one that demanded more bravery, more leadership, and more belief in decency than just following orders ever could. Gallery's choice didn't just spare 58 German lives or yield vital intelligence. It showed that victory gained through honor is more significant than victory gained through savagery. It proved that even in mankind's bleakest times, individuals can make choices that respect our better angels. If your relatives have tales from World War II about times when honor prevailed over hatred, when foes picked humanity over vengeance, or when normal people made exceptional moral decisions, post them in the comments below. These tales matter because they remind us that the capacity for decency isn't held by any one nation or generation. It exists wherever individuals choose to see their foes not as monsters, but as fellow humans worthy of dignity, even in the middle of the most awful war in human history.